Thank you, Council President Gerger and council members, and thank you for the opportunity to present the 2024 tax-supported budget. This is, I would say, and I've said this each year, this is I think the most important responsibility that I have as mayor. Our city charter, the charter that we're currently operating in, which dates back to 1952, the current form of government, set, and it clearly states in our charter that it is the responsibility of the mayor to present a budget every year to the city, and that is done to the city and to the city council. It's always on the first council meeting in August. It reflects the values and the priorities we as a city have. It is something that there's a lot of input, a lot of time put in, but it is extremely important to present that. So if you bear with me, for many of you, for a few of you, this might be the first budget presentation as council members. For at least two of you, for the rest of you, you've been to. This is the 19th budget presentation I have given, and I can tell you each of them does not get any easier. It has its challenges in good times and in bad. Feel like I'm going through a lot of the same slides each year, and that is because I do. I think it's important to look at some of the consistency, some of the guidelines that we have, and you'll see that in this presentation tonight. But I can tell you the budget process, and I want to start with thanking our finance director, city administrator, all of our department heads, really, and I really need to shout out to Deanna, who is again in an award-winning, between Deanna and Chris and her team, they do a tremendous job of really doing, in fact, award-winning, many awards over that period of time, but really a very steady helm, and they do a great job and make this very challenging. I can tell you, this is not an easy budget. You may think this is, but with the times we have, when we're in good times, and again, or in recession, they're just as challenging. In fact, I think sometimes when things are financially, when valuations go up, and you'll see that becomes even more challenging because as everyone is dealing with the right costs of things, inflation and everything else, it's important to balance the needs, and the needs are always great. I think all of us have folks that will call and ask about whatever it may be. And we'll talk a little bit about what city, what state, what federal, and what's private, but I think it's important that we go through a process that we understand what those principles are. And now I'm going to see where I'm pointing to. Am I focusing? Oh, just that? Okay, that's even better. I don't need this. It starts with public input. This budget, along with all of the budgets we do, starts with the public input, town hall meetings, interactive sessions. We have a number of discussions, and this is an important thing to understand too. We do a lot of input. We go through a lot of process, and sometimes you have an input session where one or two people show up. It doesn't matter. If you're the only one there, you're giving input, and that's important. It's reflective. I think oftentimes the situation is less than 1% of the people ever call or contact anybody in city government or any form of government for that matter. So you represent a very large folks, but we try to give the opportunity, many opportunities to weigh in. And we don't just stop there. We also go beyond that. So when we talk about the input that this budget reflects, it reflects, first of all, as we start the year, we have a retreat with the council in January. We set goals, all of us, city administration, the council, together, each representing different parts of the city, whether it be a ward or at large, representing the community, all coming with their own perspective. Coming with the perspective of those constituents that contact us. So that is a process that we work through, setting the goals and the parameters as to what those goals are. The budget is reflective of those goals. It may not be during the retreat where we set the budget. We set the goals and the priorities and the vision, and then it's the responsibility of the administration, it's the responsibility of the mayor to quantify that in dollars and projects that we go forward. That's the input. But we don't stop there. A lot of cities will. stop at the point of, okay, we got the input, we wait for people to show up, we wait for folks to show up at a meeting. We do something a little different. We do a survey, and a lot of communities do surveys. But we've looked at from the league, there are very few cities that actually do a mail survey where they mail to everybody in their community. Over 31,000 surveys went out at the beginning of last month, beginning of July. We sent to 31,000 people. We did this in 2019. We did it in 2017. We did it 2 years before that, and 2 years before that. We've been doing this for a number of years, every 2 years. Now you wonder why the 2 years became 4. COVID hit, and it was a little difficult to do that survey during that period of time. So this is a 4-year. So you'll see a little bit in here. We gave people, we told folks, try to get the survey in by the end of July. We went a little farther. We went a full month. And actually, there'll still be surveys that'll trickle in. I know they'll trickle in all the way probably up till next year. Who knows? We might get a survey from 2019 here in a week or so. But it doesn't matter because every survey is inputted. Every survey, especially that has comments or other suggestions, will be read. I will go through and read every comment that is in it. But you're not going to see all that tonight because we wanted to make sure, because the survey priorities drive the budget. The survey is really how we determine what are those top items you want us to focus on. So we can anticipate, and we based each of those budgets based on the previous survey. So I wanted to have a lot of this inputted so I could have it tonight to see if there was something that went out of what was those top priorities in 2019. If something would have rose to the level of 1 that wasn't in any of those other surveys, okay, you would have probably seen an adjustment on tonight's budget. That's why we had a lot of folks putting a lot of entry, doing a lot of data entry over the last several weeks so that we could look at where that is. So the parts of the survey I'm going to show you tonight are all of the surveys we've received up until today. All have been inputted. Now, if things come in from here, trickle in, it's not going to change really the percentages. It may add a few more comments, but it won't change drastically. And we gave folks a month, but even if it does, we'll still count. And every survey that comes in will be counted, whether it comes in now or comes in a year from now. But we wanted to make sure that at least for the budget purposes, and that's what I'm going to show you tonight, the priorities from that survey as to what the budget priorities are, and we do a customer satisfaction. I think this is even more important because I've run a business for 33 years. Anybody who runs a business wants to make sure that they poll their customers. Sometimes a lot. A lot of folks will poll constantly. You ever stay at a hotel and how many emails you get the next day of how wonderful your stay was or whatever you do? That's because they want to improve on what your experience is. We as a city want to improve on what services we provide. So we'll do that. Those are the 2 areas, and I'll give you a little preview. I will be giving you the whole survey with the results and try to cross-tabulate with east, west, north, south, either at the next council meeting or the first one in September. I just want to make sure we tabulate all those. We focused on the budget piece first to see, again, if there was some type of anomaly that would focus our shift. You'll see a little bit of a shift, but not in the top priorities. So that part of it being said, here's that customer satisfaction in the survey that we had. Now, for those of you who have been to these budget presentations, you'll recognize this slide. We updated the pictures a little bit, but it's very similar to the one that I've given every single budget from 2019. If you go all the way back even to 2017, you're going to see a little later in the slides. I'll give you the 17 and 19 numbers too so you can compare the 2 surveys prior in this category. This is the satisfaction part of the survey. This is the part where you'd ask people, rate our services. And you've seen that if you saw the survey. I think it was from question 20-something to 33. There's a series of questions that talk about services. Some are not all services. In fact, these are predominantly what you see are services. There were some questions on about how are we doing with seniors or youth or arts and culture. Those aren't really city services, but we want to gauge those too because we're part of that. We still collaborate. We work with those things. You'll see that as I come forward and give a presentation on the survey again next meeting or the meeting after, a full analysis of those surveys. But this gives you an indication of where we are with services or water or sewer overall. And that's the one that's with the water tower there, 92%. I mean, over all of these are and one thing I need to probably point out in this survey, all of the surveys we've done in the past were done in February and March, in the winter and spring. This is the first survey we've done in the midst of pothole season. So I'm going to show you a little later how that translates on road conditions. But for this, this was post snow plowing. But it's still very high. And you'll see, I'll go back and show you 17 and 19 a little later in the slides. The only slides I'm going to show are this one and then one for the priorities. But because we don't have all the data in those other areas that are ready for this. But these are pretty significant parkways. I mean, these are really telling. They're very high marks, which is really a positive reflection on our staff. And this is the important piece. Most of what we do, most of this budget, the primarily asset that we have is human resources. That's where we fund a lot of what we fund. Is human resources. Yes, we have assets. We put money into trucks and into asphalt and all those things, and I'll show you some of that, and you'll see that obviously but it's the human resources. We brought to you. We did something we haven't done in all of the years that I presented budgets. We did a wage study. We did it probably at the right time, because one of the most challenging things for almost any employer in the city of St. Cloud or anywhere in the country, in state and country, is finding workers, finding people. It's different than it used to be, and we found that in it. Important to understand, city government is not immune from the private sector. If it's hard for people in the private sector to find workers, it's just as hard in the public sector to find workers. In fact, sometimes even more so. And so we did a wage study. And we haven't done a study in all those other years, because if you're going to do a study, don't do a study and then just leave it on a shelf. Do a study and then implement it, and what's what we did. You approved those packages last year, beginning of this year. All of our 9 unions are done. So you approved all of those contracts. Those are, in fact, I think because we did the study and because of they were probably the smoothest of the years, at least from adoption and morale. Morale is high. But I can tell you, if we didn't do that study and we didn't implement that study, and that wasn't reflected in this budget, we would be down a lot of folks, particularly in the area of public safety. There's no doubt in my mind we would have lost a significant amount of police officers. We were on that bubble, but because of what we did in the area of human resources, our number one capital item, we made those adjustments. It's reflected in here. We knew that there would be a cost to that, but the cost of not doing it would mean we would not have the people to do the services that are required, that people are asking us to do. So this satisfaction numbers we would have would be easily shrinking going forward if we couldn't meet with that demand. And that's what we did, and that's why we did it, and that's also reflected in this budget. Priorities. Now this is, for those of you who've seen this, the 3 top priorities we've had in every single one of the surveys we've done. As I said before, it would have changed if something would have came out like, I don't know, park or something. We would shift a little bit. Of course, we had a referendum on that, so something else would have had to come out there. But one can anticipate, and this isn't really rocket science. You all hear from people. What do you hear? Roads, public safety, traffic. So this isn't surprising. What is surprising a little bit is this is the order in priorities. This is the first time since I've given a budget presentation that public safety wasn't number 1. It fell to number 2. Number 1 is road conditions. And also, again, the first time it's interesting because there are 2 things that happen in the summer. Potholes, and that happens every spring. And so we did this survey a little different, so we knew road conditions would be there. Of course, if they weren't, then they'd probably question the survey. But public safety is also, when you look at crime rates over nationally, and especially in Minnesota, they tend to spike in most places in the summer. So that's where you see that. And so public safety is still the top 3, traffic congestion. And then you add all of the road construction going on in St. Cloud. And so the ease of getting around, when you send out a survey, is clearly going to be different than it would be in any other time. And I can tell you, of the 18 years that I've been mayor, I have never, ever seen this much road construction in the city of St. Cloud in all those 18 years. In fact, I can go back to the almost 40 years that I've lived in this community. I have never seen this much road construction going on in St. Cloud. Between the city, the county, and the state, we have never. And our numbers, actually, if you look at the numbers of roads, what we've done in the next 3 years, is at the highest level. But then you add in the county, you add in the state, and it's never been to this level. And so that will be reflected, obviously, in the budget, but it's reflected in the last 2 budgets. The budget guidelines, and this is important because this really sets what the principles are to bringing you a budget. First of all, it's important, and it's not my money. We are entrusted with the public dollars. And so it's important to understand that it is not my checkbook. It is not how things are in how I would spend things. So, although those who know me know that that's also the way I live in my business. It tends to be being very frugal with the dollars that are entrusted to us. But it's also important to understand that that we have a responsibility to the folks that we represent. And when it comes to the property tax, and again, this is the property tax supported budget. I'll talk a little bit about why we use partnerships, but it's important to understand that folks have a difficult time, and these are tough times. Inflation has hit us higher than in most of our lifetimes, and it's been a challenge. And it's difficult for some. For some of us, it might be not a big challenge if we're paying another 20, 30, 40 bucks on a property tax statement. But for those who are having a real tough time even meeting the standards of a 1 month, that can be a significant thing. So it's important to understand each and every person that we represent and what financial issues are dealing with them. For some people, it's right on the bubble. When we talk of the issues of people experiencing homelessness, there's a pressure, there's a ratio of income, median income to the median price of a home, and that you can be right on the bubble of that. Any type of pressure, if we can control, try to ease that pressure, but still find ways to provide services through partnerships and collaboration, we should do that in every way, every place we can. If we can substitute property tax with some other type of form of dollars, federal, state, private, we should do that. Fees where it makes sense, we should do that. So that is really that principle. Core function of the city, this is what's really a challenge, because we all hear from people who feel that cities should have a responsibility in a lot of things. If you stick to the core function, public safety, infrastructure, you're going to be able to handle those things in good and bad times. If you start going beyond those areas, the budgets would be, I can tell you, and this is, and I've said this is an opinion I have, I know it's shared by many. There are some things that in the area of, and I've said this and I'll say this is my personal opinion, I'm presenting you the budget, social service, if we go into the area of social services, which I believe is a county role, if we go down that path, I can tell you, going through this budget, if we had those types of expenditures, we would not be able to do roads and public safety, period. There is no way a budget could. In fact, this is a challenging budget to just do the core items. It is a very challenging budget of being able to do that. If we were spending in other areas, I know other cities do in Minnesota, our size or maybe larger, but this would cause that issue that either puts the pressure on those trying to pay their bills at home, including their property taxes, and us for being able to do the services that are core. And this is, when I talk about these core public safety and infrastructure, it's not just me saying it, it's the survey results show it. These are the top priorities. We'll show you when we give you more of the results, and in fact, even on this slide, I'll show you where number 4 comes in. So you get an idea what the fourth and most important things. Once you get to 3, it drops quite a bit to 4, and it drops a lot to 5 and 6. So the significant ones that most people are writing are those top 3: road conditions, public safety, and traffic congestion. Capturing the base. This is now this is a policy that we've had since I've been mayor. It was a policy both adopted by the administration and the council. As we grow, we capture that base. Challenging when there's no growth, extremely challenges. We went through that during the Great Recession in 2008. We had to make significant cuts. We went through a budgeting for success exercise following what was done in Colorado. We did a lot of analysis. I'm just talking this morning. I want to bring that process back again next year to focus again. We haven't done it since the recession, but I think as we move forward, we should look again. It's always good. It's always good to look at everything you do and anticipate and look at where those priorities are. Especially since we just did a survey. There's nothing wrong with going back and looking almost to what a lot of people would say zero-based budgeting. I would just say starting from zero and working up. We do that pretty much for the most part. But we're going to do that next year as we go through the 2025 budget process. But we capture that growth. In tough years when the growth is non-existent, you make cuts. When the growth is significant, if you keep to the same philosophy, you capture that, and we did last year, and rightly so. There was some pretty significant growth. You're going to see in a chart in a little bit that growth has slowed significantly. But we did what we did to be able to cover the costs of inflation. We have inflation like everyone else has inflation, and those costs are seen. And then fees should cover the cost of services. We did a fee study a number of years ago. We also are going to do a fee study before the in fact, we'll try to do that soon rather than later, a fee study on all of our fees. Fees should cover the cost of things so that property taxes don't have to subsidize it. There are some areas where you're never going to get to the cost of the fee. Animal license, the dog license. If we actually charge what a dog license would cost based on the services we provide, the dog license would be what, $300 a pet. I mean, so there are some things you subsidize for an overall benefit to the city, but there's some things you don't. So we want to do another fee study so we can determine where we are. Are we charging too much, not cover over the service? Are we charging too less? That will balance us out so that people who are paying for something that others in the community are not, the fees cover those costs. Not reflected in this budget, but in 2025. I just wanted to preview a couple of those parameters. And then partnering and leveraging private and nonprofit resources. During the Great Recession of 2008, this is what we did a lot of. We actually funded a number of things, and now those things fund themselves. And we were funding them prior to that. And we were able to partner. In some cases, we do a little bit yet. Some we completely got out of the funding of those types of activities. And we partner. Probably our biggest partners. We partner with the private sector. We've done a lot with service clubs. I mean, I can tell you how many parks are either the Kiwanis or the Lions or the Rotary. I mean, we partner. We get a lot of folks that put capital up, and then we partner. We put some dollars to it. Those are great partnerships. The COP House, the community, the Public Safety Foundation, they actually pay for a lot of the things that our public safety folks use. So we continue to make those partnerships so that we can reduce that overall cost. RSVP. There's groups that I meet with all the time, and I appreciate and thank them for what they do, because otherwise we would be spending so much money in things that they do for us. But our bigger partners, the federal and state government and the counties. I want to partner more with counties. You're going to see, I'm going to talk a little bit, not here, but I'm working on putting together a group. I was looking at the end of August, but we're doing some things. We can talk about that a little later tonight on the area of those experiencing homelessness. I want to bring together the counties, bring together the nonprofits, and really address that issue. We can facilitate. We aren't going to pay for everything, but we can facilitate those who are better equipped to fund those things. Federal and state. You set the priorities. We set the priorities when we look at visioning. And it's really our responsibility as the administration to come up with ways to pay for those priorities. And I can tell you, most of what we try to do is find partnerships. And whether that's state or federal dollars, bonding, for example, at state level, it's the same priorities. Everything that we're trying to prioritize on, we just try to find a way to fund those things at the state or federal level. I can tell you in our road project next year, we're doing University Avenue. If not for the state dollars that came forward, that would all be property tax. And it would have been the year after, I think. I think we moved it up a year. We moved it because of the state dollars, something that we were fortunate to have because we brought those dollars up. And that was thanks to the legislature. I think the Representative Olgermont in fact, made a phone call and said, what road do you want to do? Well, we don't want to mess up any more of the east side, but University was one of the parts that for next year. So we just timed it a little different so that we could do it next year. And so that's going to be a little... Federal dollars. We're looking for federal dollars for a feeder pipe or a pipe of some sort. They're going to Tracy over here, but we're looking for federal dollars for that. We're looking for a huge $100 million bonding to look at some of the infrastructure, the connectivity, and some maybe purchasing some buildings on plans that we've already adopted, at least in our plans, our comp plan, our trail plan, our east side plan. How can we take the infrastructure that otherwise could be paid for by property taxes, but I don't recommend it, or could be paid for by sales tax, which is another tool we use. So those are areas where we partner and leverage. Here's the growth in the tax base. I show this every year. You'll see a big spike up, and you see a spike coming back down. So that's where we're looking at the growth this year from where people looked at that valuation. That's the valuation. That's the market. We don't set those things. They're based on a formula based on the market. So that is the value as your homes go up. It's not the city setting your value because we think we need some more revenue. It's a formula that's based on the formula of what the value of houses that are selling in your neighborhood or your area. Here's the levy. So in keeping with the principles that I talked about before, this budget captures the growth. Every budget that we've presented have captured the growth unless we ask voters to go beyond that. We did this year, so what you'll see, the only part that's not part of that growth is the referendum on parks. That goes beyond. We ask the voters, when we look at capturing the growth, is there a time that we say, do we need this? So I can tell you, we've done this a few times. We did it with roads a number of years ago in this neighborhood that we're in. We did that with a bond. That bond passed. We did that with police and fire. That bond passed. We did that with parks. That bond passed. That went beyond the growth. That's where you had a need. You demonstrate that need. You look at the priorities. We ask the voters if they're willing to go beyond that policy of capturing the growth. And in each case, they've said yes. Or we've asked them to do sales tax, which is different. So this is the budget. If you look at the growth, this is the levy, by the way, the levy. The overall budget I'll show you in another slide, but this is the levy piece, the property tax part of it, which in our property tax supported budgets, about 45% of what we spend comes out of this. This is how the levy compares, or our tax rate compares on a per capita basis to the rest of the state. I show this chart each time too to show that you may get, people come into town. I get this from time to time. Well, the taxes are so high in St. Cloud compared to where I live. Well, this is the state average, the top line, and this is St. Cloud, the bottom line. And again, not for any other reason than being cognizant of the people who are paying these bills. We want to keep them in their homes. We want to be able to make sure that they're thriving and not having to make choices that this is a choice that we can help still provide the services through partnerships, collaboration, and efficiencies, but at the same time try to keep that manageable for them. This is by a category, so this is the overall budget. So this is with all the funds. The part I showed you before is the levy, the property tax piece. This is the overall budget. Again, capturing that growth and utilizing, and you'll see this a little later. It's a combination of capturing the growth, using LGA increases that the legislature still hasn't got us back to the level that adjusted for inflation, but it's a big start, and I think LGA actually going forward, I think is adjusted for inflation going forward, which is good because we'll see that. It's just unfortunate it didn't pass 2 years ago and then had a 21% inflationary increase. Would have been nice to see, but that is there, and also the utilization of our federal funds are part of this too. What's reflective in here is that capturing the growth. And again, most of the dollars are going to that human resource part of our budget. And by the way, all of this is online as I'm speaking or as I finish speaking, so folks at home can see this all, or call my office and you get a physical copy of it. The council members should all have a physical copy before you leave here. Should be here in back or back there. They're back there. This gives you a better indication through a pie chart showing, again, property taxes 45%, local government aid. I can tell you back when I was in the legislature, because suburban communities always thought the local government aid was a waste of money, and always thought every city had so much of it. St. Cloud at one time had about 45% of their budget in local government aid. So this gives you an indication. As a regional center, local government aid is important. I think it's critical because our property taxpayers of 71,000 people live in St. Cloud, but 180,000 people are here every day. That 181,000 of services that we have to provide should not be paid for by 71,000 people. That's where local government aid helps pay. That's also why we asked for bonding, because a lot of that infrastructure has a more regional approach, and it makes sense. Same with federal dollars. It makes sense to utilize those dollars. Or sales tax is another tool that we've benefited greatly for over the years. So that's where it comes from, and that's where it goes. Our priorities, if you look at what the public wants us to put on priorities, roads, public safety. If you take public safety, you add that 51, you add the public works, which is 9%, that's 60%. If you take debt service, of that 14% of debt service, most of that is in the area of public works and public safety. That's where most of that debt service is. So if you take that and you look at even some of that, other pieces of that, whether that be IT or, IT has a pretty significant. Our public safety folks have used a lot of information technology services. We're over 70%, well over 70, 75% is focused on that core. So when people ask us to focus on these things, our budget reflects that we're focusing on roads and public safety, or infrastructure and public safety. That is where the bulk of the budget comes from when it comes to the property tax piece of it. We try to keep that public works piece down to a lower part of property tax by leveraging municipal state aid, sales tax, bonding, because our roads, unless it's a neighborhood project, are utilized by a lot more folks than just the people that drive on those roads. Our roads connect to those other cities, so we look at federal dollars to be able to do that, or state dollars to be able to do that. This is the highlights of just kind of, again, this shows you 2023 and 2024. I think the state legislature does biennial budgets, so every 2 years we do an annual budget. And so I think it's important to always look at a couple of years, and you look at roads, you got to look at a few years. It's no different than we look at statistics in crime or anything. You've got to look over a period of time. So between last year and this year, I would say kind of the post-COVID years, this year and next year, public safety is where, again, flat tax rate, capturing the growth, no increases in fees in this budget. And then last year, 6 additional police officers, a firefighter. Going forward, community service officers and police engagement. We're one of the few departments that has a pretty strong, in fact, I think the only one that has an engagement division, and then a deputy fire chief. That is a piece of those. And then I told you before I was going to focus on the survey piece. So those numbers I gave you before, here's how they compare to 17 and 19. But I added one in here, and that is we didn't have these in the other years. I never put in the road conditions because I was talking about a service. I mean, the condition of the road, it is a service because we fill potholes, and so it's important to put in there. But this year, since road conditions went above public safety in those top 3, the condition of roads. Again, we asked this question during pothole season. We asked this question during the worst winter pothole year we could have ever had. It was the worst winter on history, and not only snow and ice and all that, but that's where you see a little deviation. If you look at the other things, you look at parks and greenways in the 90s, drinking water, 90s. I mean, you go from 90 to 95. It's a nice, jump, but it's still within the 90s. I think once you get past 90%, you're doing pretty well in those areas. Snow plowing. This is the first year we asked the snow plowing question outside of the actual snow plowing year. 19 was during the snow plowing year, by the way. That was in the winter. I don't think it might have been the worst winter we had. It wasn't, because last year was the worst winter. But you're in that same within a few. Street light and pedestrian facilities. Those are more in the neighborhood, and then the overall services. 94, 92. I mean, if I was as a business owner, if I had what is that on Yelp? Is that like 4 point some stars? I don't know. if you were in that range, that's a pretty good thing to be at, and to see that is good. Road conditions, I put this up here because if that would have came out any different than that, I would have been shocked in having a survey at that time. But in 17, we were at 76, and in 19 we were at 78. We dropped to 50, so we're 50-50 on that. But it was, and potholes. The word potholes was on a lot of those surveys, so it's understandable. I can tell you, it's the worst year we've had. But it's also one of the most expensive years in dollars that we've done over the last 3 years. So we are addressing that issue of those road conditions. But this is where the survey gives you kind of a little impression of those years. Investing in the infrastructure, and that's why I put the roads in there, because we are investing. In 21, this is the last 4 years. So if you look at the city portion of what we're doing in infrastructure, $19 million in 2021. Again, post 2020 was a tough year. We didn't do much because of COVID. We came out of COVID, 19, 21 million, 43 million, 28 million. Each of those years, we're keeping at a high level. If you go back, we weren't even close to those dollar amounts in those previous years. We put dollars into those types of programs. We still did reconstructs. We still did mill and overlays. But last year, last year, 2022, we did a record amount of mill and overlays that the city's never done that much road work in a year. And we didn't just do that year and then go back to low numbers. We are keeping it up. And again, this year, with the combination of state, federal, county, we've got more going on. And that's reflective on the ease of getting around town. You'll see that later in the survey when I come back with that, because in fact, it's nice when people do the survey and they say, ease of getting around is difficult, and then they put in parentheses, but we understand because construction's going on. Not everybody puts that in parentheses, by the way. But that part of it is important to understand. But traffic, the congestion piece, we work as an area planning organization, so we have to work with our partners there. One of the reasons we want a Mississippi River crossing on 33rd is to ease construction on Highway 23 and on University Avenue. So that's a federal requirement, and we're going to be going for a earmark next year in Congress to do that bridge. We've got the planning money for it. We're going to look at that. We asked the legislature if we could use sales tax to do some other arteries, 3rd, Traverse, and then over on the east side, but they've said no. They said no again this year. We're still lobbying those efforts, and hopefully they'll give us that opportunity, because we'd love to be able to do that. That would ease traffic congestion, but we can't do that with property tax. It has to be either sales tax or state bonding. The road projects are just too expensive. It would take our entire budget. If you looked at what the budget was for just the property tax supported, $43 million would wipe out our entire budget just in 1 year of road projects or infrastructure projects. We couldn't possibly do that. So we need partnerships and collaboration with that. Road resurfacing, this gives you the resurfacing as proposed in 2024. As you can see, the overlays we've done in the last 3 years, more overlays than we can go back all those other years and look. That's where you're doing a lot of that resurfacing in the overlay. We've had discussions as to how we can do even more of those. We had discussions on assessments and those types of things. We're going to bring those things forward and hopefully have that discussion about how we could do it 25% more on the area of overlays if we did some assessment where it's necessary. So we'll be bringing those types of things, again, trying to figure out ways to do more with resources we have. But this is the road resurfacing. Street improvements, this is a map, so you kind of get an idea. We're not just doing it in one part of the city. We're doing it all over the city. This is everything except for the mill and overlays, because the mill and overlays aren't determined until at the end of the year in October, September. Our folks, public works folks, will go out and score and grade based on folks that do that for a living, that we hire engineers to do that, and not just going here and there based on what neighborhood you live in. It's what is a score, and then we'll do that score high in that area. And those change from year to year, because when we have all the detours we have right now, some of the roads that might be really good shape that we're diverting all the traffic on might deteriorate pretty rapidly. And so they may need a mill and overlay prior to what might have otherwise been the life of their road. This is the pothole thing. So this gives a little better story in how many potholes we filled this year. I think I gave you a number a month ago that said over 1,600 tons, but that was up till June 15th. Here's up to July 1st. July 31st. July 31st. We've used over 4,000 tons of asphalt from April through the end of July, which is far more than we have used in the last 10 years prior. Now, I had someone the other day say, well, then, the roads have always been that bad. I mean, no, it really is a weather-related phenomena. The fact that we had a lot of roads, a lot of ice, a lot of melting, a lot of those types of things, because if it was just the roads, you would have seen a large amount last year, but last year we only used 278 tons. We had a better winter last year than this year. And if you look at those previous years, it also, I got to go back and try to correlate the 2019 survey and the 2016 survey just to see, because obviously there were less potholes those years. You can kind of see based on the pothole fill during those years. So it'll be interesting to see where road conditions came. But obviously with 4,000 tons of asphalt, we had a lot of potholes. And that's a weather piece, but also it's a road work, because we did a lot of mill and overlays in the last few years, and on those roads we don't have potholes. And on this year, after all these rounds are done, whether it's county, state, or city, there won't be next year. And hopefully we have that super El Nino and we don't have the same issue weather-wise than we had. We can reduce that. But that's a huge budget item. 4,000 plus tons of asphalt, they're not cheap. And so those are also reflected as we look at this year and going into next year's budget. What happens next in the budget process? We have this now as presented, and this is where the council, we have a series of those meetings where the council, weighs in the front area for accepting the vision, but weighs in now on the ability to analyze and to really delve into the budget in depth. You as a member of the public have the same ability. You can go online and look at that. If you have suggestions as to areas that you think are needed more or need it less, or where you'd see a change that you'd have, please give us input on that. They'll have some input sessions that we do, but you still have the opportunity to contact anybody here as the council or administration or any of our folks. We're going to be doing 2 more of the Public Safety 101. When I talk public safety, we did 2. We did one in Ward 1 and Ward 2. I really hope, I want to give this is really an opportunity. I know people are busy. We're trying to do these on some consistency. We're doing these on a Tuesday night, 2 in July and 2 in August. And so the next one is at Fire Station 2. And so it's an opportunity for folks to come out. That's tomorrow from 6 to 8, and it's in the 3rd ward. So Councilmember Anderson's ward, and then we'll be in the Councilmember Conway's ward at Tech later in the month. But please come out. The folks are there. The experts can answer those questions. You can give input. And I would love to have 200 people show up there and give input. Because if it's a couple people, then you're going to hear from me a lot, because trying to but if you have input, we'd love to hear the input. That's really the purpose of this, input and questions. But questions are important too. People, they're 101 for a reason. They're designed so that we can explain what city does in all of our departments, and this is focused on public safety. And then in September, I'm doing a budget tour. So on Saturday, September 9th, at City Hall right here at 9 a.m., we'll start with an hour of opportunity for input and information. And this will be on the budget in general, if you got questions or if you just want to give some input. But also I want to talk a little bit about the state, federal, and the city, state, and federal. So we have a park referendum. This will be an opportunity. We'll have the folks from parks if you want to talk about our bonding for the parks. So where is that at? You want to give some inputs on that piece. We did it on a Saturday morning. We do a lot of these during the week. Nights are sometimes tough during the week. Try to do this on a Saturday morning, so we'll be here in the morning. We will go as long as you want to go on Saturday. I'll be here all day if you want. But we're going to start at 9 for that first hour on the input. I'll talk a little bit about why we go to the state for some dollars for bonding. So that's your opportunity to weigh in on bonding and kind of talk a little bit about that. It's your opportunity to weigh in on federal dollars. We ask for earmarks. We ask for federal dollars in roads, municipal state aid. We ask for federal dollars and grants, so I can talk a little bit, about that, or you can ask questions or give your input on that. And then we'll get on a bus at 10, or roughly around that time, and we'll drive around to all of our city assets. So you can, if you have a question, you want to go take a look at, you have this dying desire to show me your road, we'll drive over to your road. We'll drive on a bus that's probably doesn't have the greatest shock absorbers, and we'll see how that road is. But we can talk a little bit about more about visually seeing it. Sometimes it's hard to come in and sit at a table, look at a screen. We'll do the tour. We've done this before with budgets. I think this is just kind of a mobile opportunity to do the budget. So that'll be in September. If we need to do more of these, we will. I just wanted to make sure that there's at least a date so folks can look at that Saturday, the 9th of September, way before you approve any type of preliminary budget. And then we'll do some more after the preliminary budget so we can still weigh in on whatever that budget may look like at that point. And then in September, there's the preliminary budget and tax levy. There'll be a public hearing here on the preliminary budget. We started that a few years ago. It's not required by state law, but we did it because it's important to get public input. So we have a public hearing on the preliminary. Not required. The Truth in Taxation hearing in December is, but we added this public hearing so that the public can weigh in on that budget. November, you'll get your preliminary property tax statements in the mail. Another opportunity, once that comes out, I'll try to do another public meeting even before December so folks can look at that, bring those statements in, we can answer questions. Oftentimes at Truth in Taxation, people are surprised at their valuation. That was already in May. We got that in the newsletter, so your valuation's already been determined. And we'll, again, remind people that's always done when you get your value in May, and that's usually highlighted in our newsletter and other areas, but we'll focus on that. And then December, of course, the public hearing will be held and the adoption of the final budget and tax levy. So that's what's coming up. And as I mentioned before, what's coming up on the survey is I wanted to tonight, but again, we would have had to scramble to do all of the data entry, and it would have focused more on the survey. But I will be presenting that whole survey at either the next council meeting or the September 11th, and one of the two, depending on when we can look at breaking down that data and go through that. I wanted to have at least the parts that you have in here. But I'll give you a little preview because we asked a question that we did put the input on. If you recall from the survey, we asked the question, what do you like most about St. Cloud in a general community sense? And I'll show you that in a second. And then we asked, what do you like most about your neighborhood? So the neighborhood that you live in. And then what are those priorities? You've seen 3 of them, and I went down to 4. Because once you go to 4 and you start going beyond that, then they drop quite a bit. So you've got several thousand people that think the top 3, and then over 1,000 people that think the 4th one. So in the past, when we've done the top 3, it's normally been number 4. It's changed over the years. North Star was number 4, I think, a couple of times. Jobs way back in the 2009, 10, or whatever, those were Jobs. That falls really far below. But these 4 really are the ones that come out. And if I went to 5, you would see that too, but that drops by quite a bit. But you'll see those at the next one. We just want to make sure that anything that comes in doesn't, because those deviations are really small and they're smaller numbers. But here is those results. So your little preview. Neighborhood. What do people like about their neighborhood? Number 1, it's quiet. Friendly neighbors, safe, low crime, and helpful neighbors. Number 1 in there on that neighborhood, quiet, I think is almost every year it comes out quiet in the neighborhood that they're in. Community. It has all I need. I can tell you this also comes out number 1 almost every time we do this survey. It has all I need, which, you give a long list of things. We always put others, so we will tabulate all the others and see if there's anything that rises to the level of having an actual thing in there, an actual word, but it normally hasn't. We developed this survey with St. Cloud State a number of years ago. We've used the same questions each year. We just, this time we changed a little bit. We dropped some of the demographic questions because we had enough people tell us, none of your business how much I make every year. Although we had a number of people said, none of your business how old I am either. But we kept that piece in. We did have that part. But statistically, we're asked to, and that's voluntary. That's the one part. Well, the whole survey is voluntary. So we did have some people that just sent back saying, don't know. But we all those are data. So you have the community, all I need, families here, medical services, parks, trails, and recreation. Those were the top in the community as a whole. and then the neighborhood. And then top priorities: roads, crime, safety, traffic congestion, and downtown. These are the top 4 that came out of the survey based on the responses that we had. So, and these are, again, we'll probably bring ones, maybe going down another number or so, but for the most part, once you start dropping off, you drop off by several hundred, and then you're into 200 or 300 responses. But clearly, road conditions came number 1. For those entering, it was number 8, I think, and they said 8 comes up almost every time, so that was the road condition piece. But this gives an idea of priorities. And it's helpful because when you set priorities, and you set priorities as to where we're focusing our dollars, our resources, our time, this is what came out of those items. And so a lot of times these are, and most of the time, this is really helpful. I said very few cities do this, and we take a risk. I just want to show you know. I know why cities don't do this every year. Because you don't know what you're going to get back in responses. You don't know what the customer satisfaction piece is going to be. We do it. We'll give you the data. We'll give you the other items that when I show you it the next time, we'll show you seniors, youth, and all of that. You'll see all those numbers. I actually showed you on the services, the lowest one we had was road conditions at 50%. So little preview, at least at the point right now, those other ones are in a higher number. But I wanted to focus on those things that reflect the budget. So with that, that is the budget presentation. I'm sorry it took a while. I only do this once a year. But it is the priority of our city. And it's online, so folks can go online. Certainly give us a contact. There are dates in here. We'll have more of those input sessions, and look for more information, as I said before, about some of the things we help facilitate. On those experiencing homelessness, we're going to be doing that later in August, beginning of September. We want to try to do some grassroots things first to have something that's more meaningful. And you'll also see another a downtown piece of it where we take some more. We've done the 4 wards in the 101, but I also want to do downtown as a separate entity, even though the first ward was downtown that we have. So we do that. With that, I will leave it at that. And President Gerger and council members, thank you for your input and your vision, and look forward to the discussions we have starting Wednesday.